Welcome to Mother's Narrative Network. Before we begin, please like and subscribe for more daily uploads. Hope you enjoy today's video. Ghost Stories Part 4. A few things have happened to me. My halls of residence dated back to the 1800s and had originally been a boys' school. I remember one night having a very vivid dream of there being sealed up rooms in between rooms, and you were okay if you had a yellow ribbon tied to your door. For the record, I never did drugs or smoked anything. The next morning I said to a friend I'd had a really odd dream. She asked me what it was. Her face went white. She had had the exact same dream. Odd things would happen. I would hear heavy breathing coming from the other side of the room, heard footsteps walking across the room, and one time I heard a baby cry. I lasted one term in that room and moved to a different hall, as I just got such a bad feeling. Another occasion, I went into the common room and the TV was flicking itself on and off. I was the only one there. My nan's funeral was at 3 p.m. A friend of hers had traveled down for the funeral. She was talking about being late, because her watch battery had stopped working and had visited a jeweler for a new battery. We were at the wake and somebody asked her what the time was. She looked at her watch and it had stopped exactly on 3 p.m. This was a new battery. There are an awful lot of walled-in slivers of space in the UK. I moved around the furniture in a university room and started to hear knocking from the wardrobe. I checked behind the wardrobe and found a walled-in, painted-over doorway. Years ago, I took part in a Halloween walk or storytelling event. It was at a site that had previously had a large manor house, but that had been demolished 70 or so years ago. I was one of the storytellers, and had looked a little into who had lived in the house at the turn of the last century. I told my, completely made-up, story, naming one of the former lords of the manor. We then went out for a walk. As we were standing around, waiting for everyone to assemble after going to the toilet, etc., I felt a very distinct slap or cuff on the ear. Nobody standing near me, and I wasn't standing under a tree for anything to have fallen. I assume the lord of the manor took offensive at my story. Coming home from work late one evening, and missed my usual fast train. The one I got was all stops to my station where it terminated. It was old rolling stock with heavy latched doors between carriages. I was in the front carriage, seated just past the latched doors, facing the driver's carriage, solid, locked door, with the central doors ahead of my seat. As we moved from station to station, people got off, and I was aware of a man sitting at the bank of seats in front of me, just past the central doors. We approached the penultimate station, and I saw that he'd got up to stand by the doors. At no point was he facing me. Just looked like any other city commuter. The doors closed and we pulled away, and I glanced up to see him still there. I assumed he had stood up too early for his stop. As we got toward the terminus, I sent a text to my DH asking if he'd pick me up. I gathered up my things, and got off at my stop. Then I realized I hadn't got off alongside anyone. I was the only person that stepped off from that carriage. I looked back, but the carriage was empty and there was nobody else on the platform behind me. After my cat died, I'd often feel her sitting on the bed, curled up beside me. Oh, I've got one. When I was about 10-11, I went to the local cinema with a friend. It was an old seafront building that had previously been a theatre before it was a cinema. It's now a theatre again. I went to the toilet during the movie, and was completely alone in the toilets which were up some stairs. I heard someone come up the stairs in heels and cross the toilet floor. You know the sort of 90s pumps I mean, the clicking sound is distinct. When I came out, no one was there. No one went in any of the other cubicles and there was no other access or exit to the toilet area. I even checked under the other cubicles. The footsteps went from one side of the toilets to the other and just disappeared. Freaked me right out, and I never went to the toilet in there by myself again. I wonder if they have redone the toilets when they remodeled. A few, and I'm not a very woo sort of person. But I know what I've seen. Was once walking my dog out in the sticks with a friend, and we saw the ruins of an old castle. I mean proper ruins, no roof etc. On our way back home, we saw a castle in the distance where the ruins had been, and there were windows with lights on inside. It was a fully standing castle, as if it was lived in and very much alive. We found drawings of what the castle once looked like, and it was as we saw it on the way home. It was like the ghost of the castle. Secondly, saw a woman in a red dress on my landing when I was a child and very much awake. Ran to my mum, asked if it was her, and she said no. NC as don't want linked to my other posts. My dad's parents both passed away in the family home that was left to my dad. They still live there now. I've had feelings of someone just sitting at the end of my bed before when I was living there. I think it was my nan looking over me. My room was their main bedroom, and where both grandparents passed away, my parents extended the house and took the new master bedroom. One Christmas me and my cousins, on my dad's side, were asking about what our grandparents were like as they died before we were born. Dad and Auntie chatting about them. Suddenly the TV turns on, and on the DVD blue screen mode playing the song Holly in the Ivy, but the CD in there was Robbie Williams' greatest hits. Auntie shouted, "Hi Mum." Our grandparents were florists and grew flowers etc. Another time at a family gathering, other side, the adults all wanted to try this thing they saw on the telly about someone sitting on a chair, and you try to lift them with just your fingers, but it's too heavy. You then do something and put your hands above their head, you can then lift them. Well, it bloody worked. They were all so shocked they pulled their hands away. The poor person came crashing down and the dining chair broke too. Never seen my granddad look so white. When my eldest cousin was born, the letter J perfectly formed in mushrooms on the field and disappears overnight. His name began with J. Another time, at my cousin's house, I was convinced her cuddly toys were all moving and dancing alive. Woke my cousin up and she could see it too. Went and got my bro, and other cousin from the other room, and they came in and laid down and could see it too. We all laid there watching. It's one of my fondest memories with my cousins. We now think it was actually cars driving past and headlights, making shadows, where the cuddle toys were resting on her wardrobe and perfectly came through the gap on the curtain. But it was such a surreal night, he. The four of us all laying there together. I'm very anti-woo and prefer to believe in hallucinations and tricks of the brain, but when my nan died, just before she passed, she told us there'd been a man in a green suit in her hospital ward. It somehow came up in conversation with one of the nurses and she said yes, she's heard that from several patients. They all say that they've seen this man in a green suit. My nan also said that Grandad had been there, sitting on her bed waiting for her. He died about 20 years previously. If you Google Neil Oliver and ghost stories, there are a few good ones. I'll try to be concise, but this one really caught my imagination, about a woman whose ghost was haunting people while she was still alive. This elderly lady was at a drinks party, with neighbors old and new, when she overheard someone ask a young couple how they liked their old cottage. They said it was lovely, but things were spoilt by the fact that a young woman, they described her and her clothing, often appeared in their sitting room in the evenings. She usually sat and wept, but sometimes stood against the chimney breast, in great distress, banging her head against the wall until blood ran down it. The elderly lady was aghast, because she had lived in that cottage during the war. That's why she earwigged the conversation, and had been deeply unhappy when, searching for a document, had found letters which proved her husband away fighting, had been having an affair with another woman. She had a baby and a toddler, and felt in the depths of despair, and remembered crying in the sitting room, and the specific incident, where she leaned on the chimney breast, and banged her head till it bled. So weird, but how else would you explain that? Neil O has quite a few well-attested stories. I recommend him. Just to agree with PPS, who say they're anti-woo. So am I, honestly. But we had poltergeist activity in our house for a while some years ago, and frankly, I know what I saw. I don't swallow any old rubbish, but some things are very hard to explain. I'm still a skeptic. I take some convincing. But I think the really stupid people are the ones who declare bombastically that it's all a load of rubbish. As someone said, whether ghosts exist is uncertain, but people definitely see them. In other words, people aren't necessarily lying when they describe a ghostly encounter. It's just a matter of whether the apparition has any objective existence. But many stories, especially when more than one person saw the ghost, are hard to explain. There's a lot more going on, I think, than science can explain at the moment. One day, as with electricity and other phenomena, possibly there'll be an explanation. I used to live in York, born and bred, but moved away when I met DP, to get away from my narc family. One night, I was in a pub called the Golden Fleece. It's known for being haunted. We'd walked in and decided to not bother with the first bar, as it was really crowded, but to walk down the corridor to the lower bar. My ex was in front of me, and I was walking down, when something grabbed the back of my top and threw me down the corridor. Nobody there when I picked myself up, and the staff didn't seem too surprised. Years earlier, I was in a cafe under the cafe building, and the one next to it used to be a police station. The cells were underneath at some point. They dug out the cells and found some skeletons, at least one, with a knife stuck in its ribs. This news had just hit the papers when I wandered in and got chatting to a waitress. I jokingly asked if it was haunted, and just as the waitress was about to answer, a set of keys came flying down the counter, almost hitting me. Nobody could have thrown them. There was nobody there. In 2009, my cousin sadly died of swine flu. Baby survived, she didn't. My dad phoned me after 1 a.m. that Saturday morning to let me know she had been in hospital over 2 weeks by then. Just after I got the call, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Both me and OH were in bed. When I got up, my cat was acting really strange and nervous. I'm certain my cousin was saying goodbye that night. She had never been to my house. I lived in with OH, and we were not big buddies. I hadn't seen her for a few years. I've had a few woo experiences. My great-grandma used to see things, and I've seen a few things myself. I'm in a new build, less than 2 years old. I've had a couple of woo experiences here. Someone shouted in my ear when I was in bed, not asleep. I'd not long been in bed, and I bolted so fast I nearly ended up falling down the stairs. Absolutely shit myself. My DS4 once asked why the man was there and then was gone, and my 1-year-old laughs and waves at empty spots in mid-air, like she's playing with someone. The estate is built on old farmland at the bottom of Pendle Hill. There are ruins of old farmhouses on the estate. Their foundations have been made into features. Neighbors have reported odd things too, some of them around these houses, voices, but no one to make them, that sort of thing. My granddad worked in Bankhall Pit, and before that Hapton Valley, left weeks before the disaster, and he told me some stories. He's not woo at all, but there are some things that he could explain. One day he was in the pit with his apprentice, and saw a head torch coming towards him. Called out a couple of times. No answer. He was getting quite cross at this point. My granddad wasn't a miner, but the work he did could be dangerous, so it was restricted people in the area only, as the work carried a higher risk of explosion. The head torch kept bobbing towards him and kept coming, and then bobbed right past them. These were tiny narrow passageways. You had to go in single file. They bricked it, of course, and legged it. They didn't come across the light on their way back, and when the next person they saw swore no one else had come up before them. Another time, he was working with his apprentice and heard someone shout, "Get down," so he did, grabbing his apprentice and diving into the dirt. Just then some overhead cables snapped and basically crossed over each other at shoulder height. It would have decapitated them. No one else was down there. Oh God, saw a mention of Halsike and Pendle and knew I had to contribute. Another one from Burnley. I have seen some very strange things, most of which were around Townley Hall. I used to live near there and was walking up Todmorden Road, where it's walled on either side. A little fella was coming towards me with a Yorkshire Terrier. I nodded to him. Something seemed off. I turned around and he wasn't there. He'd gone. But there was nowhere to go. It was a stone wall. Ah. My mum and dad also saw a strange wolf-man creature crossing the road a bit further up, near the top Townley car park. It was kind of hunched, looked like a man-wolf. That whole area is very atmospheric. My grandma also swore she saw fairies in the woods behind Townley. I enjoyed the Uncanny TV program shown in October last year. There was one about someone who kept seeing a child running past her window. It turned out that part of the labyrinth of a local disused mine went under her house, and a young boy working in the mine had got lost in the pitch black many years ago. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Before you go, please like, comment, and subscribe for more daily uploads.